this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Apple Card members can earn unlimited daily cash back on everyday purchases wherever they shop. This means you could be earning daily cash on just about anything, like a slice of pizza from your local pizza place or a latte from the corner coffee shop. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app to see your credit limit offer in minutes. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com. You know how it's never really about where you're going, it's about who you're going with? The right people can turn any drive into a great memory. That's something Toyota really believes. They design vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who make plans happen and bring everyone together. Inside, everything's built with passengers in mind. Comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that actually works so everyone can relax and enjoy the ride. There's room for the people, room for the stuff, and room for the moments that happen along the way. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
You're about to listen to the Late Round Fantasy Football Show, which originally aired on YouTube. If you'd like to catch the show live this offseason, you can head to the Late Round Fantasy Football YouTube channel, youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. We'll be live each Wednesday at noon Eastern. Without further ado, here's this week's episode.
Welcome in. It's a Late Round Fantasy Football Show, sponsored by DraftKings. David Kitchen here, COO of Late Round Media, with my CEO, JJ Zacharyson. JJ, I saw a post on X today, and it said something along the lines of, the biggest hack in life is to find you a manager that is a middle-aged girl dad.
Oh, really? Is that,
yeah?
That actually kind of probably is a very real thing.
Yeah.
There's more compassion. You know, they're not too old where their life is just their job.
Yeah.
They have to do things outside of work, but they're raising girls instead of boys. So there's, there's a little bit more of that empathy.
There's some empathy there. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that boy dads can't. I'm just saying, I have a boy and I have a girl, and my boy is a lot more wild than my girl is. Let's say that.
This is the post-launch era of Late Round Media, as far as we just launched our prospect guide on Monday, actually Sunday night, as is the case that we usually do. So people have been diving into that. I had our friend Steven Krupka message me yesterday a picture. He goes to FedEx every year and gives the guide to them and has them print it out and put it in a binder.
I've seen people do that before. I've also we've already gotten the request from someone to make it an audio book, audio file for the guide. I will say the prospect guide is a lot easier to do that than the draft guide is, because the draft guide is so image and chart heavy and stuff that it's really, really difficult to translate that into audio. You could hypothetically do it for the prospect guide, but I don't want to get into that. We're already doing a lot. It's 170 pages of content, and I don't have time to record it. Could I get someone else to record it? I mean, let's talk in a couple of years when AI is like flawless.
I was about to say Robo JJ is coming. I don't want to I don't want to scare people, but it's just like a perfect use case for you reading your own draft guide, but not having to read all 173 pages. Also, we'd have to it's not exactly the profile pages themselves are a little bit scattered, where you have like the colleges and the comps, the player comps, the 3-player comps, and the Zap scores. So there have to be a little bit of finagling.
It would be, in my opinion, it would be really awkward, because you just be like, Jeremiah Love, 6'0", 212 pounds, comps, Ezekiel Elliott, Bijan Robinson, it would just be.
And I get it,
entertaining,
But as someone who likes to mow the hop on the riding mower, I listen to it.
Thing is, though, I've always viewed the prospect guide as like a reference sheet.
Yes.
The draft guide, I think, is one that you
for sure
consume and like sit down and you can do that with the prospect guide too. Don't get me wrong, but it's so player page heavy and stuff that I always view it as like a year later or something, or even like during your redraft drafts or when you are looking at the waiver wire and you're like, hey, is this guy any good? You can go back to the prospect guide and kind of see where things were at there. Whenever that was published, but yeah, did you see this comment, by the way? I think Kitchen looks more handsome than
I wasn't going to bring it up, but this is an interactive show. So during the show,
here's the thing, though.
after the show,
the thing. The fact that they're bringing that up means that is it the default that I look more handsome?
Yeah. Maybe it's the Vandy hat. March Madness happening. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like JJ, we talked about like the post launch era. You want to fill people in on what you've been filling your week with, which I think, just let me go on the record. I think is well deserved.
Thank you. Yeah. Look, the guide's done. I've been working still. I did the free agency episode that was a half hour long for
half hour solo, which is a lot. Which is a long time.
A lot. I was sweating at the end of recording that. But yeah, I did the free agency show. We got the mailbag later in the week. I'm doing other shows and stuff, but there's not as many like pressing non-weekly things going on. And look, I game. I'm not like a massive gamer anymore because I have other responsibilities that just don't allow me to sit down and like do a lot of cool stuff. I've never been like a huge campaign guy, more multiplayer and stuff. But regardless, I picked up Pokopia. I did the new Pokemon game. I back in the day played Pokemon. I played maybe 1 or 2 in my like adult life. I haven't been like, I'm not like really, really into Pokemon, but I played Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing came out during the pandemic and it was the perfect kind of escape during that time of what was going on in the world. Feel almost similarly right now where just the world is crazy. And Pokopia is a mix of like Minecraft, which I didn't really play, and an Animal Crossing. And it is phenomenal. It's one of the most addicting, fun, cozy games that I have ever played, if not just number 1 on that list. And yeah, yesterday I wasn't feeling that well. And so I told Gadula and Kitchen, I was like, I'm just going to hang out this afternoon and not really do much work. And I built a house in Pokopia. That was my
Makes me want to get a Switch too. The girls, we only have a Switch.
Yeah.
But, maybe one day we can elevate to Switch 2. But I also know that if I got Pokopia, the way that I am, it's just like, that's why I can't really get on video games because I will get, I told you about my stint with Clash of Clans. Same thing happened to the Kansas City Royals where it almost like derailed their season. It almost derailed Fantasy Insiders back in the day when we had that company. So I'm just going to stay away and I'm going to live vicariously through you.
This one's great because I can play and like the family gets involved and like we all watch it or they watch me play and like we all like see what's going on and it's like there's the family involvement too. But yesterday it was just straight me. I mean, I was just built the entire day. Yeah.
All right. We want to say just thank you to DraftKings for their sponsorship of the show. They have the early best ball contest out there. And then I don't think you can use the code that's in the description and read everything about that. But we're going to get in a few segments. We're going to compare the top 4 as far as like the best values compared to JJ's Zap model rankings with the rookies and the worst value compared to his rankings. So stick around for that. And again, late round draft guide, lateround.com. Join the membership because we got dynasty stuff coming, so you can go to late round and then hop on over to the Patreon. And with that, JJ, you ready to get on to the next segment?
Let's do it.
All right.
Today's fantasy news.
I feel like me not being there last week. We didn't have a lot of it'll just been a free agency show basically. If I was
I mean, it would have been really hard to do the news segment last week because I was going to be doing this show. Like I did the Debro Perspectives episode where we talked about the big moves in free agency, and then I talked about those plus others in the free agency show. So, this is more of like the initial reaction to kind of to some of the stuff, and then you guys can get deeper analysis on the actual show. Like the first item on today's list, I will almost definitely talk about on the mailbag episode, but I'll at least give you guys a teaser / give you the analysis here today too.
Yeah, Waddle all the way to Denver. Obviously the big trade that we weren't really expecting. Supposedly they were working on it during the season, but as much as we've talked about Jaylen Waddle, having the news alert yesterday that he was going to the Broncos was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And there's lots of implications there. We'll talk about the next item. We'll just bundle them together, because we're talking about the Dolphins here. But report today saying that Achane's not available, say the Dolphins. And I'm not sure if that's just saying, for the right price, he could be for like a first rounder, but saying he's not available, we thought that he was going to be traded because he was rumored to be traded during the season, rumored to be traded to the Seahawks. And so now they're saying he's not available, which is, I guess, is a good thing if you're Malik Willis, because the question that we're asking ourselves is, did he know they were just stripping this down all the way, and that his leading receiver is going to be Tutu Atwell?
Yeah, I mean, right now, they have Tutu Atwell, Jalen Tolbert, Malik Washington out of the slot. You have Theo Weiss, who played with Luther Burden. I remember doing his profile last year. Terrace Marshall. It's just a bunch of dudes who either have busted or were not highly sought after prospects. So look, I want to start with Achane since we're on the Dolphins. I've seen some takes that like this is fine for Achane because he can maintain a high target share, etc., or like his target share is going to go out of control. The issue I have is like eightfold with Achane. So Achane already had an amazing target share, which is why he was so relevant in fantasy football. He's a great running back, but having that kind of volume through the air is what allowed him to be an RB1 and has allowed him to be an RB1. Now you lose the competition of Jaylen Waddle because, again, target share is this giant 100% pie. So if you lose a 24% target share in Jaylen Waddle, then that's more looks that can go elsewhere, more looks going to your playmaker, which is Devon Achane. The issue I have is that his target share was already very, very high. Like if you see Achane last year or the year before, and you see the situation right now as lateral, I disagree, mostly because we have a new coaching staff that we don't know exactly how they're going to want to deploy him and how well he'll fit and what they do on the ground. We have a new quarterback in Malik Willis who has not thrown 25 pass attempts in a game throughout his career. Maybe there's more efficiency on the ground for Achane, and that would be helpful. But what I'm saying is that essentially, like, I don't know, like, is there a 25% target share ceiling for Achane in this offense? I don't know. Like, that's not something that we see outside of Christian McCaffrey, really, in the NFL. And that's really the next step that Achane would have to take in order to be relevant. And then you think about the amount of scoring that's going to be available in Miami, and there's a question mark.
A lot.
Yeah, there's a question mark at quarterback right now. Not to say that, I definitively feel one way or another about Malik Willis. I'm just saying that we don't know what Malik Willis is. Like, objectively, he's thrown 155 pass attempts in the NFL. We don't know how good or bad Malik Willis is. And then you look at the weapons that we just talked about, and you're like, how on earth, and I'm sure they're going to add somebody, but how on earth is this team going to score a lot of touchdowns? Like, where is that touchdown total coming from? We know that running backs and their success, the high-end ones especially, will correlate to at least moderately good offensive environments. You don't want bad environments. This could be a really bad environment for Devon Achane. So I'm worried that the target share ceiling has already been reached, or at least is close to getting. And then on top of that, you have a poor offensive environment. So if this is lateral to people, I would say this is a downgrade on what's going on right now in Miami. It was a downgrade when they got Malik Willis, and then Jaylen Waddle being traded. Sure, you could say that doesn't matter that much, but overall, it's not like things are getting better for Devon Achane, right? Jaylen Waddle going to Denver. I've also seen some takes that this is lateral, or this isn't a great opportunity for Waddle, or whatever the case may be. Because look, Waddle in Miami could have seen a 30% target share in that offense, right? But I see this is a very classic case of like a lot of above average to mid wide receivers on Denver, and us not wanting to assume certain target shares for those players. Even Cortland Sutton, he's getting older. He's not as dominant as he used to be. Not that he was ever like amazingly dominant. But look, it's like, the Pat Bryants of the world, Troy Franklin. I think this hurts Troy Franklin probably most out of that group, because he's someone that started to lose snaps towards the end of last year. He's not the best blocker in the world. And it seemed like Pat Bryant, Pat Bryant looked like he was going to be a focal point in that one playoff game before he went out in that game and got injured. But like Pat Bryant is someone that could play sort of a slot role for them. Sutton on the outside, Waddle can move inside out and do pretty much anything for them. I think that's their base 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver set look, with the Bryant, Pat Bryant rotating more than what we would see from like a Sutton and obviously a Waddle. But Jaylen Waddle, I mean, look, I know that 2 years ago I called him out as a player to target, and it was his worst career statistically, and I got a lot of crap for it. Understandably so. It was a really bad call. But Waddle's been below a 2.19, which is what he had last year, yards per out run rate, in only 2 of his 5 seasons. He's been at or above 2.19, which is incredible. That's unbelievable efficiency. One of them was his rookie year. One was 2 years ago when that whole offense was horrific. Even Tyreek Hill had a really bad season from an efficiency standpoint. He's consistently in that 22 to 24% target share range. His targets per route run has dipped below only 22% once, which is a great number. Like I said, had that one outlier year in 2024, but he already bounced back from that season, and he can win anywhere, everywhere, all across the formation. So I think Jaylen Waddle himself as a player is very, very good. Denver, 2 straight years over the last 2 seasons, pass rate over expected over 0. They were 4th, top 5 in pass attempts, raw pass attempts last season. I'm not worried about this competition on this team. Jaylen Waddle is easily the best wide receiver in Denver right now. Like, he is easily the best talent that they have at wide receiver. I would argue it's not that close. I know that some people like Cortland Sutton. I've never been like a massive Cortland Sutton dude, but he just, he wins differently than Jaylen Waddle will. Waddle can command a higher target share and such, and maybe Sutton be more of that red zone threat for them. I mean, I think Jaylen Waddle is a tier above Cortland Sutton in terms of just raw talent, especially at this point in their career. So I think, in the end, good players create target share. Jaylen Waddle should be able to walk in and see a 22, 24% target share. And if he gets that in this offense, it could be really effective. This is an upgrade for Jaylen Waddle, I think, overall.
Yeah. And we talk about draft capital. I mean, you have to look at what the Broncos did. Yeah, they had this room of receivers. Benjamin Solak said that possibly they might be able to trade Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims now, or at least put him on the block. But they gave up a 1st and a 3rd, swapped 4th round picks with the Dolphins. But that's a lot of draft capital for for someone. So they plan on using him.
I think that, so like I compare it to like Buffalo giving up what they gave up for DJ Moore, and I think DJ Moore fits Buffalo really well. Like, I like both of those players in their new environments quite a bit for redraft purposes and season long purposes. But I think Waddle is, like, any Buffalo fans out there that are trying to cope. Like, I think Waddle is, and not only that, it's the end of the first round pick. But I think Waddle is definitely a better wide receiver than DJ Moore at this point. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I understand why they did all this. I would imagine that Troy Franklin is more of the guy that they should move over Marvin Mims if they are moving somebody. Just because
Mims has special teams.
Yeah, Mims does a lot of different stuff for them. Like, he's at least gadgety. Troy Franklin is someone who I know he was putting up fantasy points, and I know that he was at one point basically getting the best target share in that offense for like a 4-week stretch last year. But there was a very clear change in the way that they were approaching things. I think a lot of that has to do with he's a wiry guy. He doesn't win against press as well, and he doesn't block as well. And that's just not something that they're going to want in that offense, especially when J.K. Dobbins went down, when they needed more blockers or better blockers for more inexperienced running backs last season. So I think they're going to just keep the room as is, but we'll see what happens because there are obviously teams out there that need some wide receiver help, including Miami.
Hollywood Brown moving to the Eagles. So $10 million 1-year deal for Hollywood Brown. Obviously, we know the Eagles are currently in flux with AJ Brown and trade talks, but they get Hollywood for a year.
Hollywood's fine. They've needed a wide receiver 3 forever. They've been trying to solve that and they haven't. They had Jahan Dotson who went to Atlanta and stuff like that. I'm if you want to like try to buy really, really low as a throw in Dynasty, because he's already, he's not done much for a while and it's not like he's a special talent. And then you say, oh, I'm going to just gain value, assuming that AJ Brown were to get traded. Because if AJ Brown gets traded, Hollywood Brown then becomes someone that would be more valuable. You're just gaining value. I don't think Hollywood would be a massive winner from like all of a sudden you're starting him every week in fantasy football if AJ Brown's gone. I think we're just going to, because they kept Dallas Goedert. Devontae Smith, I think, is better than what his general. I feel like I have Devontae Smith as a target in fantasy every single year at this point, but I think Devontae Smith is a really good wide receiver. And I think they do too. I think they know that. And so, if Hollywood Brown is there too, I could see like a 15 to 17% target share season from him as long as he stays healthy. But, and they'll probably
just hope they throw the ball.
What's that?
So let's just hope they throw the ball this year.
Yeah, right. I mean, different coordinator and situations. We'll see.
Say it with me, JJ. Better in best ball.
Better in best ball. That's right.
Yeah, that's Hollywood Brown. Christian Kirk goes to the 49ers. So he's joining Mike Evans there. And that Niners receiver room is going to look a little different this year.
I don't think this is nothing with Christian Kirk there. It could signal, because I think he's just at this point in his career best served out of the slot. He's had his moments. He had his moments in the playoffs. If you look at what they have healthy, it's, George Kittle's more than likely not going to be ready to start the year, or at least 100%. And then, you have Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, and, Juwan Jennings is not there at the moment. And so you're really staring at like Christian Kirk could be their starting slot to kick off the year. And I think Pearsall's an inside out guy, so you can get creative there. And Kirk fits the Kyle Shanahan yak, kind of player that he always kind of strives for and gets. So I think it makes sense from a fit perspective. And obviously it's a pretty good environment. So, again, you could throw a dart in best ball. That's really what this kind of signing is. This isn't a, Adam from a season long perspective. And by the way, the stuff that I talked about on the free agency episode, I think it needs to be clear that was more from a season-long redraft perspective. Like the Bashal Tutin, Chris Rodriguez discussion, Bashal Tutin is by far the season-long upside kind of guy where even if you miss, you can make up for it and such. Chris Rodriguez might be the better value from a best ball perspective because you're going to get some production late in your draft, and that's big.
Maybe a few spike weeks from him.
Yeah, and because I think the most likely outcome is a committee in that backfield, but the ceiling outcome is easily Bashal Tutin between the two. But that's again like Christian Kirk, very unlikely to be someone in season long that we're going to be plugging and playing each week.
Yeah, what about this one? Justin Fields going to the Chiefs.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's like a long pause because people don't know what to think about this.
When I saw it go down, my initial thought was, okay, Patrick Mahomes obviously had the ACL last year. They want to have like a veteran that could play behind him, that could step in. I saw some people be like, why wouldn't they get Kirk Cousins? Well, I think that they ideally would want to have someone in development too, that they could feel confident in, that's younger and such, and that could be dynamic. And obviously Justin Fields is that. Like Fields is capable of doing big things in an individual game environment. The problem with Justin Fields is the consistency game in, game out, and him doing that across the entirety of a season and such. Like we know that he can win games with his legs, and it's not like he can't complete a pass. And so I think the Chiefs see that, and obviously he's a dynamic player. And the other thing too, signing Fields instead of a guy like Cousins, you could hypothetically have special packages for Justin Fields and Andy Reid.
Andy Reid likes to,
yeah.
Someone said triple option with Mahomes, Fields, and Kenneth Walker. Just imagine the possibilities there. All right. Darnell Mooney to the Giants. I like missed this. I went back through our channel. We, in the Discord, we have our news and rumors channel. I was like, oh, I totally missed this signing. So Darnell Mooney goes to the Giants this year.
Yeah, deep threat for them. He's like another type of like Darius Slayton type player for them. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to bring up Darnell Mooney too much on this show anymore after telling people last year in season, like 3 weeks in a row to pick him up, and then he did absolutely nothing. But I still think that he can play like a down the field role in that offense. And there's really no obvious two in that offense. So it's a little bit intriguing from that perspective.
Okay, let's look at some still available free agents. So I've got them listed here. I thought Calvin Ridley was going to be on this list, but he took a pay cut to stay with Tennessee, which was...
Yeah, he knows that the Titans are Super Bowl bound, baby.
He saw those jerseys and he was like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. You can cut my price tag, my cap hit by $11 million. I'll be good. Quarterbacks, we still have Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, assuming Aaron Rodgers right now goes to the Steelers.
I'm assuming Rodgers will be a Steeler.
And then receivers, we have Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, and Juwan Jennings. I don't know if like Ayuk is going to be on this list. The
only person that surprises me a little bit there is Juwan, just because. I mean, remember last year he was like hoping to get a big contract and stuff.
Yeah, huge contract. It was coming right off the Super Bowl. And
I think Juwan Jennings is a good player, but he's not like take over the game type player. He's always going to have separation issues and such. But like Deebo and Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill coming off the injury, they're all kind of over the hill at this point. And I think, if you look at the last like 5 to 10 years and the way that especially wide receiver has sort of played out, you do generally see some of these veterans sign later in the process than right away. Juwan's the only one. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's one of the Dolphins go-tos, or if Deebo is one of those players, just because, they need something. It's just a matter of, at this point in their careers, what's going to be important for them? Is it that, like, I think from Jennings' perspective, it would be money, because it's not like he's been highly sought after and touted throughout his career. And so therefore maybe the Dolphins can offer him something to be their one, this year to get them something. Whereas the other guys might be searching for that ring.
Yeah. He hasn't had like a huge contract. And so I think he's going to be searching for some cash.
Which by the way, shout out friend of the show, Kendrick Bourne, for his new team in Arizona and signing a contract there.
Yeah. That's what we were talking about. As far as Malik Willis, he had the option to go to the Cardinals or the Dolphins. And to me, it's like, if you had the option and you were like winning, or like your environment was important, I'd want to go to the Cardinals, because at least they have pass catching options there. Friend of the show, MHJ, Trey McBride, there's at least options there in Arizona. Yeah, Michael Wilson. Yeah.
I mean, maybe I think both franchises are kind of, in the crapper at the moment. So
yeah.
So we'll
I'm
see.
just saying one crapper seems to be a lot crappier than the other crapper.
I mean, yeah, agreed.
That Calvin Ridley, though, when he stayed with the Titans, does that make you bullish on the Titans' passing attack this year?
I wouldn't say bullish. It's probably a little too strong of a word.
Just want to know if you're coming around to things.
Cam Ward's fine. I think Cam Ward might end up being like a late round dart throw this year, because I just care about mobility. Like, quarterback is so deep that you're going to get Malik Willis relatively late. You're going to get Cam Ward relatively late. I think Malik Willis is a much better, obviously. Like, Malik Willis is like potentially, maybe this is too hot, potentially like prolific as a rusher, right? Like, I'm not saying that like that's what's going to come out and what we're going to see, but that floor, because remember, rushing at quarterback in fantasy is about floor, not ceiling. You need the passing for a ceiling to hit. Floor will get you Terrell Pryor and Tim Tebow and stuff like that we saw throughout the mid 2010s. Ceiling, what we've seen from these unicorns recently, is the Josh Allens, Lamar Jacksons, where they're putting up 7% touchdown rates on top of having these crazy rushing numbers and finding the end zone so much. I think Malik Willis can do the rushing side. Can he do the passing side? I don't know, but I'm willing to throw that dart because why wouldn't we? Again, season-long redraft take. Although it's mostly the same probably in best ball too.
Hashtag late round QB says Joe Bondi and Thomas Scotty. Translation, JJ, please say something nice about the Titans. Yes, that's what it was. I am all for these mocks that have Jeremiah Love going to the Titans. I know it's a lot at number 4 to draft a running back.
It's a lot for that particular franchise, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yes, but it'd be fun, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. Let's just have some fun.
Sure.
All right. Let's have some fun with today's data as well.
Today's data.
All right, we got best and worst ZAP values versus DraftKings average draft position. So we mentioned earlier, DraftKings has they have the early best ball, and so this is before the draft has kicked off. $1 million for this contest, and right now people are they're throwing darts, and they are assuming things change, like the Waddle trade that would change ADP. Draft is going to change ADP as far as before and after. But JJ, you took your ZAP values and compared them to these ADPs.
Yeah, I have the ZAP categories for these guys, and then I have my positional ranks and my rankings. And then I'm showing the difference between my positional rankings and where DraftKings ADP currently has them. The biggest player where there's the biggest difference is Antonio Williams. So Antonio Williams, coming out of Clemson, was productive every year there, but never ultra productive, and more than likely is a slot player at the NFL level. And that definitely, I've written, talked about a lot of that this offseason. I wrote about in newsletters about the slot player kind of disappearing from the game. But in the right environment, number one, maybe he could be a little bit more, but number two, if a team runs a lot of 11 personnel, I think that he can make an impact. His top comp in the model was actually Ladd McConkey. Now, that doesn't mean that he is Ladd, but it is saying not only that, but the model didn't hate Ladd, the new iterations and stuff. It didn't love McConkey. But the weird thing with Antonio Williams, right now, you can see my positional rank is 11th at wide receiver for him, and he's ranked 19th by ADP. Right now, so all of the ZAP scores in my rankings are going to be anchored by projected draft capital. Right now in NFL Mock Draft Database, he's a top 70 overall pick. He's projected to go after Malachi Fields, before Elijah Surratt, who people have way above him. I love Surratt, so understandably so. Above Skylar Bell, above Bryce Lance. I mean, there's a lot of players that people like that Antonio Williams is projected to be drafted ahead of. We'll see what happens, but I do think that you should be leveraging a lot of the mock draft resources out there when you're doing these early best ball drafts, because you could be drafting players like Eric McAllister, for instance, who the ZAP model likes a lot. Like McAllister has one of the best breakout scores in this class, but I don't know if McAllister is going to be a day 2 pick. And if he's a day 3 pick, then I mean, it's rough, right? There's some off the field stuff. I didn't even write about this in the guide. But there's some small off the field stuff that might be driving that cost down a little bit. But if he's a day 3 pick, we don't see wide receivers very frequently give us much usability, especially as rookies, out of day 3. So McAllister being one of those players where right now I have him ranked 4 spots lower than where he's going. But let's go back to the favorable guys. Ted Hurst, I have him 7 wide receiver spots ahead. This is more of I think I actually think Ted Hurst could be better in best ball. He's a deep threat. He's a down the field player, perimeter player. One of his 3 comps was Nico Collins, but he's leaner than Collins. Collins a little bit beefier than Ted Hurst is. But Hurst, coming from a smaller school, I get a little bit afraid of that because we don't generally see many hits from small school wide receivers. But in this draft class, you get a lot of mediocre profiles once you get outside of the top 6 or 7 wide receivers. And I'm willing to place that bet on Hurst at wide receiver 10 right now versus wide receiver 17 via DraftKings ADP. Chris Bell, what were we going to say?
I was just going to say that with these ADPs of Antonio Williams, Ted Hurst, and Chris Bell, they're in the 230s right now, which is basically in the 20th round. Yeah. So right. They are free. And what this is also saying with the 230s is that there are some drafts that they are not being drafted at all. So you talk about unique having some of these guys being on your team would set you up for potential success during the season.
One thing I'll say about Chris Bell, and I wanted to keep him on here because I just wanted to go with a process to show you the difference between is that Bell is coming off an ACL. So I do think that you can largely ignore him from a draft perspective if you want to, because we don't know when he's going to actually be healthy enough to play. But Bell right now has a 54th overall draft capital tag on NFL mock draft database. So he's in a spot where he's likely to go day 2. I don't love Chris Bell. I don't hate him. He's just another one of those like bigger bodied outside perimeter receivers, but he does have a little bit more to his build than some of the other guys, like a Chris Brazzell or, a Ted Hurst, who I talked about, a Jacoby Lane, those players that are a little bit leaner. Chris Bell has a little bit more bulk to him, which might intrigue a team, which might rise his draft capital a little bit, but you gotta watch out for him because of the injury. And then at running back, I have Emmett Johnson at RB2 in this class right now. That can change. That probably will change because there's a lot of variability in there. But right now he's RB5 over on DraftKings. The one thing I'll say is DraftKings is a full PPR site, and Emmett Johnson is probably the best pass catching running back in this class. So there's a very real chance that, especially if he gets day 2 draft capital, I don't know if he will, but early day 3, even if he's a round 4 pick, he could play some sort of pass catching role to start the season if he finds the right spot. So I like Emmett Johnson as a player, as a prospect. And the fact that he's 3, I'm 3 spots ahead, that high in a rankings list is pretty significant. And then on the bad end, I already talked about Eric McAllister, Zach Branch, who I've talked about a lot on shows. He's a gadgety player who might be better in best ball, so I can understand this to a degree. I'm just not in love with the profile. This is a profile where, he got a lot of looks behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of manufactured stuff. And if you look at history, this is in the prospect guide, but if you look at history, players who've been drafted on day 2 with this kind of, just in general, actually, but in day 2 in particular, with this kind of usage, the only guys that have really hit over the last 5 or 6 years has been Luther Burden and Wan'Dale Robinson, but both of them had way better age-adjusted production than Zach Branch did. You're going to get guys like Anthony Schwartz, like Rondell Moore, rest in peace. Just a lot of players who were decent in college, had a lot of speed and ability, but they were on the smaller side and they didn't find the right team to really maximize that gadgetiness to their game. And I think that that's what we have with Zach Branch, where like his top comp is Mecole Hardman. That's another example I could have thrown out there. But I would not be shocked at all if the Chiefs really like Zach Branch, because this is just the archetype that they seem to enjoy going after, whether it be Mecole Hardman or ending up with Kadarius Toney, who's another player that would profile as this kind of guy. He just scares me from a production perspective. Jacoby Lane, lanky outside perimeter receiver, fine enough production profile, but I didn't think he had anything special to his game. I'm 5 spots below. And then Bryce Lance. Now, I think I subjectively might like Bryce Lance a little bit more than what the ZAP model is showing, but he's getting a lot of steam. People really like Bryce Lance. And I think there's a lot of things that are at play here. Number 1, he's unbelievably athletic. Number 2, he's coming from the same school that Christian Watson came from, and Christian Watson obviously has moderately hit, and he's at least like a big play threat. That's great in best ball. And so we're making that direct comp. There's also the story of him being Trey Lance's brother, which might
say the family dynamic.
Get him on people's radars. But there's a lot of red flags to his analytical profile. He didn't produce until after 3 years in college. Like, he did nothing, literally like nothing. And then he's older. He's an older prospect. And the combination of all that, he has a breakout score of 0. He just didn't register it because his adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt never got high enough at the right age. So he did give us crazy production towards the end of his collegiate career, but it was a little bit too late just given his age. And then you adjust it down based on the program strength. It's a very, very volatile profile. And when I'm approaching the draft, like pre-draft, I don't want to put a very volatile profile very high in my rankings until I see landing spot and draft capital officially. I'll play it a little bit safer, which is why I think like an Antonio Williams, who I think can play in a lot of spots, aside from the 11 personnel stuff that I talked about, he's at least a safe bet as a player. Like, we generally know what we're getting from him. Or like, I think Ted Hurst can work almost anywhere. And so that's my stance on Bryce Lance right now. I mean, Debro really likes him, and I respect the crap out of Debro and the work that he does. And he talked him up last week on Perspectives. And so like there's a lot, and I know that like Brugler seems to like Lance. And so like there's a lot of people that are on Lance that I, approve of as analysts, that that I enjoy as analysts. And so yeah, that makes me think a little bit differently. And this is the thing with a player like Lance, and this is more dynasty and rookie draft focused, but with a player like Lance, I'm fine with you like spending a third or a fourth round pick on a player like this. It's when the hype train does get, or at least a lot of people start to back the guy, and then his ADP rises, and then, he's overdrafted because of the athleticism. We know historically that those kinds of players have screwed us in the past, and I don't want to get screwed. I think that he's the right upside play. Yeah. So sure, in best ball, if you want to throw that dart, be my guest. But I do think there's a lot of red flags to his profile.
And speaking of volatile, let's get on to today's main event.
The late round main event.
All right, we've got favorite 2026 draft comps, and this is for the rookie running backs. JJ, do you want to give us just a brief overview of this?
Yeah, so all I'm going to do, this is just for fun, really.
Yeah,
like
this is just for fun.
Comps in general, in my opinion, get thrown out too loosely oftentimes. Like I could rant about player comps for days, but like, a lot of times people are skewing towards like successful players in the NFL. So they see some of the comps in the prospect guide and they're like, well, I thought Jordan Tyson, one of his 3 comps is Corey Davis. Corey Davis sucked. And Jordan Tyson's a legendary performer. Why are things looking the way they're looking? They're looking the way they're looking because it's just trying to be realistic. Like you're not going to only get hits out of unless you're Jeremiah Love. He has basically like 3 really good comps overall. But,
yes.
Like generally speaking, you're going to have bad comps for players. It's just the way that it is. So what I did though for this, and the way that my comps are generated, so people know, it's like a distance formula. So it's the equivalent of like, okay, this guy, and like certain factors are weighed a little bit more. So think about height and weight; those are weighed fairly heavily. But a player could have a little bit different of a weight, let's say, or a height, let's say, if the production metrics really line up and are really, really tight. So what it's doing is it's calculating the distance from, with adjusted yards per team play, a running back, or reception share, and it's saying, okay, this is the closest comp based on the things that you're valuing, height and weight, and some of this stuff, and some of the production metrics, but like how you're valuing them from a hierarchy standpoint. And it's saying this is the closest comp based on all of those things. So when you see certain heights and weights that aren't total, although I think the ones on today's show are all pretty on point, but I think like Ezekiel Elliott was a comp for Jeremiah Love, for instance, and he was like 12 or 13 pounds heavier at the combine. But their production metrics were really, really similar, which is why that was one of his comps. But I have another comp for Jeremiah Love on today's show. So with all that being said, these are all analytical comps. They're all in the model, in the prospect guide, and they stem from the ZAP model. Jonah Coleman, who is not getting much hype right now because he's done no testing and we just don't know how fast he is. I think he just had his pro day, but I don't think that he ran. Jonah Coleman right now is a fringe top 100 pick in the NFL draft. I think if he goes to, I love his production profile. It's actually pretty good. If he goes on day 2, he could be my RB2 in this class realistically. But he's small. You can see right here, you have Doug Martin, again, rest in peace, Doug Martin, but Muscle Hamster was 5'9", 223 when he was playing and came out. Jonah Coleman is 5'8", 220, so very similar sizes. He's shorter, stouter, strong, wrecking balls, if you will, of running backs. Reception share for Jonah Coleman, 13.2% in his best season. That's adjusted reception share. Doug Martin, 9.4%, so not quite as high. And then adjusted yards per team play, 1.68 versus 1.73. Martin is likely more athletic, like I said, and Martin was more prolific on the ground, which is why you see the adjusted yards per team play as being fairly comparable, but the reception share, best season reception share, not as comparable. So those are kind of the call-out metrics that the model was seeing when making that comp. It's very hard for a player who's 5'8", 220 pounds to have very clear comps because there's not many players since 2011 that have come out at that size. So I actually thought that the Doug Martin comp was fairly on point, all things considered.
Yeah, I saw where Jonah Coleman, obviously, he's a UW guy, Washington guy, but he made a visit yesterday to the Seahawks. That'd be fun.
Jonah Coleman to Seattle would be easily the RB2 because that would mean that they probably spent a day 2 pick and there's an opening there. And
they need a running back right now for sure. Yeah. All right, let's get on to the next one. This guy has had some a little bit of hype this year. Mike Washington.
Yeah, so I mentioned this one on Perspectives last week. I think that Washington looks a lot like Latavius Murray analytically. Again, this is not a run style thing because Latavius Murray had a pretty I don't know if you guys remember watching him, but like a very glaring, like upright style of running. And I don't know if Mike Washington is necessarily that from a stylistic perspective, but Washington's coming out at an age is another factor. I mean, there's other factors. I'm just highlighting the major ones for these comps, but Mike Washington, 22.8, is a little bit older, not super old for what we see these days. Latavius Murray, when he came out, he was older, 23.3, 6'1" and 6'2". They're both 223 pounds. They both had really good speed scores. Reception share was only 1 to 1.5% off from one another. Adjusted yards per team play, Mike Washington was a little bit better, but fairly comparable. And then both of them had kind of below average adjusted yards per team pass attempt numbers. So again, not stylistic comps here between Mike Washington and Latavius Murray, but I do think that the comp itself makes sense. And again, people hear that and they're like, oh, Mike Washington sucks. Number one, if you get a Latavius Murray outcome, that's not a bad NFL career at all for a player that is a fringe day 2 pick right now. And the only reason why Mike Washington's a fringe day 2 pick is because of what he did at the combine, which fine, whatever. But we have to keep that in mind. Like it's not like he has this like flawless production profile. And so if he is Latavius Murray, that's not a bad, like late second rookie pick. I mean, Latavius Murray had his moments in the NFL.
Yeah. Somewhat as a Titans fan, I saw that one of those moments towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the next one. Made me a little bit sad as a Kendre Miller truther.
Are you a Kendre Miller truther?
Yeah. I had a lot of them last year even.
I've never been a big Kendre Miller guy.
I'm sorry.
I think that
you won.
He was fine last year. The one thing that kept me going with Kendre Miller was that he was very young entering the league, like a very young prospect. And that's a key difference between Kaytron Allen and Kendre Miller, because Kaytron Allen is not a young prospect. And so, but aside from that, Kendre Miller didn't show receiving chops in college, 7.2% best season reception share. And his adjusted yards per team pass attempt was 0.51, very similar to Kaytron Allen, but they're both 5'11", 216, 215, similarly like mediocre receiving profiles, but then their adjusted yards per team play is actually not that bad. And it's not that bad because they were good on the ground. Kaytron Allen was really good on the ground. I mean, he was the leading Penn State rusher of all time by the end of his collegiate career. Now, obviously, like longevity and just playing there a lot and for a while, like will play into that. But he's good on the ground, not much of a pass catcher. That's what we got from Kendre Miller. And that's what I think we're going to see with Kaytron Allen in the NFL.
Okay, the next one is a little bit of a smaller running back. You got Desmond Reed with the Tariq Cohen comparison.
Yeah, I got to throw my Pitt guy in there. There's no wide receivers from Pitt that went to the combine that I wrote up. But Des Reed, man, he's a fun player, and that's how we describe the small guys, right? The small guys, they're fun.
Gadgety or fun, yeah,
they're fun. Yeah. There's always some fun running back in every class that I latch onto. This one would be Des Reed, who actually has like an incredible production profile from like a receiving standpoint. Now, again, if you go back to what I said about Jonah Coleman, you get a weird body type that you don't see very frequently. So you're limiting the amount of possible comps, right? But with Tariq Cohen, they're both 5'6". Cohen was 5 pounds heavier. Reception share was 20.4% for Reed, 19.4% for Cohen. Cohen had worse adjusted yards per team pass attempts and adjusted total yards per team play numbers because he played at a worse program, a smaller program. I should say worse just because then Pitt can actually look good for once. But Des Reed had better marks across the board in the model than Tariq Cohen did. I think that this could easily be more of like a Deuce Vaughn situation that we saw recently where ultra productive in college, but it just doesn't translate to the NFL because of size. He's 174 pounds. And a player like this, I think that like a Tariq Cohen type worked a lot better when running back target shares were higher in like that 2016, 2017 ish range, like when teams were really peppering the running back out of the backfield. Whereas now that doesn't happen as frequently. We're going after tight ends a lot more and such with this heavier personnel. It doesn't work as well with these smaller backs. So I do think Reed is going to be more landing spot dependent, creative offensive mind dependent. He's not going to be a high volume player, but I do think the comp makes sense from Reed to Tariq Cohen.
Okay, let's get to you mentioned a fun player. Let's get to a really fun player. The most fun player, some might say, Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, so Jeremiah Love, I have Bijan Robinson, who I think is the closer comp, or closest within the database to Love. Robinson was an inch shorter, 3 pounds heavier, so he had a little bit more bulk, a little bit better reception share, a little bit better adjusted yards per team play, a little bit better adjusted yards per team pass attempt, but they were all in the vicinity of one another. Like that, this is exactly why Bijan Robinson, I've said this on shows before, I don't think Jeremiah Love is as good of a prospect as like a Bijan Robinson, a Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ashton Genty. I just don't think he's there analytically. Now, there are some reasons for it, but you could make the same argument to a degree with Bijan Robinson and the competition that he played with. The reasons being Jadarian Price for Jeremiah Love. Now, Price is the better prospect from a draft capital standpoint, we're assuming, than Roschon Johnson. But that's another reason why this comp makes sense, right? Because they were playing with an NFL caliber running back in their backfield in college. So, look, I think that you're splitting hairs and you're making an argument that doesn't need to be made because it's irrelevant by saying, is Jeremiah Love better than Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, these guys that have come out in recent years? My answer to that is no, definitively. I don't think analytically he has as good of a profile, but he's still an elite player. I wrote all about this in the prospect guide. Because his draft capital just keeps rising, he's in the legendary performer category, and he's going to be more than likely a legendary performer post-draft. And players in that bucket, we don't see them very often at running back, but they give us really, really good fantasy production. Like even Ashton Genty, who also lands in that bucket, you can say what you want about him disappointing last year. I wouldn't disagree. He was still fantasy relevant. Like he still had 14 and a half PPR points per game. And things were trending in the right direction, I think, for him from a coaching standpoint and a situation standpoint. I do think that anytime a player like Love is projected to go high in the draft, you're thinking, oh, he's going to go to a bad team. And so there are some spots that are probably better than others. But in the end, guys, if you're a top 16 running back, and I talked about this on the draft capital episode last week, if you're last week, but if you're a top 16 running back by draft capital, the odds of you just flaming out are so slim in fantasy that you gotta go for it. Like Jeremiah Love should be a stud in fantasy football.
Yeah. And this is what I was saying for the Titans, especially compared to the other running backs. Having a Bijan-esque player on the Titans would at least be fun for the
thing is that I think the one thing that I agree. Like if you just had Bijan Robinson, sure. I've said this for years in like the Discord and stuff. Like I think Bijan Robinson is one of the greatest running backs I've ever watched, period. Like I think he is, his contact balance is unreal. Like I've never seen anything like that. And he's a great receiver. And he's hit a high end outcome even for where he was drafted, which was very high, And so I do think that like the idea of that is definitely there, and it's definitely safer to get a guy like Jeremiah Love than some other players you might go after. I'm not going to say the expected value is greater, but it's safer from a player projection standpoint to just get Jeremiah Love. And if you want to put butts in the seats, that's definitely a way to go as well. But yeah, I mean, like Love is a very, very good prospect. I think that's the takeaway that people should have here.
Yeah. Again, especially in comparison, and supposedly going to be like a top 5 pick. I think he's actually favored now on DraftKings to be the number 4 overall pick. Like that's his, like he's actually a favorite to go.
Which that's where we had like Leonard Fournette as probably, I mean, obviously Trent Richardson, but like Leonard Fournette as the weaker one of the last like 5 to 7 years or 10 years, right, in terms of like fantasy production and stuff, which is still not a terrible outcome. He still was a fairly good fantasy asset. Really good fantasy asset.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap up this show. Again, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, especially on YouTube, and just want to highlight a few comments. BS Perf said, "Good morning, guys. Cool seeing you guys on the NFL Network ticker."
It is always cool. Yeah. That's cool. Something that doesn't get old is when people, point that out. It's fun.
Our buddy Tyler says, shout out to the best prospect guide every year at the industry, bar none.
It's Tyler.
Tyler said that, not us. And then Petra, we were talking about Corey Davis, and he said Corey Davis would have got me fired as a GM.
But I think that this is another, again, smaller school guy where the adjustments and stuff that I'm trying to make in the Zap model, it still really likes Corey Davis. Don't get me wrong. But I think we should be wary always after I said that stuff about Ted Hurst, but still we should be wary if a guy is coming from a smaller program.
Yeah. And then we were talking about prospects. He might be a small guy, but he has a big heart.
I'll tell you what, when college football came back last year for the game.
Yeah.
I played as Pitt. Actually, I started out as the Bowling Green head coach. Okay. I had no idea who Harold Fannin was at that time. And
do you know who the Bowling Green head coach is?
What?
Eddie George.
Yeah, but he wasn't 2 years ago though.
Okay. Gotcha.
I don't think so.
TSU's two years ago.
But so I was Bowling Green's head coach, and I'm like, man, this tight end is out of control. He's so good. And it was Harold Fannin. Little did I know, I know his mom now. But then I transferred to Pitt because they offered me, and I'm not going to say no to a job in my alma mater,
Yeah.
And so I went to Pitt, and Des Reed won the Heisman because he was just those types of players. That type of player is so good in video games. So good.
Yeah.
The shifty, smaller running backs, they're so good in video games. And maybe that's where my bias comes in, where I always fall in love with these random round 4 rookie pick type running backs that are smaller and have good receiving profiles. That's Des Reed.
Yeah, there was a MTSU running back who had his own Heisman campaign, DeJuan Hicks, and this was way back when. I'm Unk status right now, but on NCAA he was amazing.
Yeah,
and he did win the Heisman for me when I played as him. All right. Again, prospect guide, lateround.com, our Patreon. You can join in all the chats, the discussions. And you know what I'm going to do, JJ, for today for our Patreon members? I'm going to create an NCAA bracket for us.
Oh, there you go.
Just so we can have some fun. It's all about the community there. So look out for that. Any final thoughts, JJ?
No, I'm excited. Next week, the next couple weeks, we'll be doing more comps. It's, this time of year, it's a little bit slower, and trying to give all my analysis on the shows that I'm doing. I'll have a fun one early next week that I think you guys will enjoy. But for this particular show, we're just looking at comps and talking prospects. That's really what it comes down to.
And again, make sure that you are subscribed to the Late Round newsletter. Have some bangers coming out in the middle of the week by our senior analyst, Brandon Gadula. So, and that's free. It's free. Yeah. We've never done as much free stuff as we have these days on lateround.com. So on behalf of JJ, I'm David. We'll see you next time here on the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. Peace.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.